What's the creepiest true story that happened to you or someone you know? When I was younger, my dad was out of town and my mom let me have a few friends over. We lived right by a pretty busy highway, and over the years we had quite a few people knock on our door for help: car broke down, lost, accident, etc. While my mom was home with us, a man knocked, saying he wanted to borrow the phone. My mother told him he could sit on the porch and use her cell phone. The man kept asking to come inside and asking if my dad was home. He eventually started trying to force his way inside. My mom slammed and locked the door, called 911, and put my friends and I into a closet. It took the police department over 20 minutes to reach us. By that time, my mom had called our neighbor and he came over with his shotgun and made the guy lie on the ground until the police arrived. My best friend told me this. Her family went on vacation to Henting Highlands a few years back, and her dad went to gamble at the casinos until about 3 a.m. before returning to the hotel room. Some context on the layout. The hotel was structured in an uppercase T shape. The elevators were along the horizontal line of the T, facing the vertical line of the T, with the rooms on either side of the vertical line. Basically, to get from the rightmost elevator to the leftmost elevator, you have to walk past the main hallway. The room they were staying in was at the very end of the hallway, at the bottom of the T. Her dad walks out of the elevator into the hallway and sees this woman with long hair dressed in all white walking down the hallway towards the elevators. Creepy, but he doesn't think much of it because you see a lot of weird characters in Henting at 3 a.m. He walks past the woman and gets to the door of his room. He sees the woman walk all the way to the elevators and turn left, important, disappearing from his line of sight. Her dad knocks on the door of the room to get my best friend's mom to open it for him since he doesn't have the card. The moment he knocks on the door, the woman he saw walks out from the right of the T and starts walking down the hallway towards him. I'll say it again. He sees her turn left at the elevators, she disappears from his line of sight, and then she walks out again from the right side of the T. And she's walking fast as hell. He freaks out and starts banging on the door, screaming for his wife to let him in. When she does, he just slams the door behind him and locks it. Nothing happened, but he didn't sleep for the rest of the night. He didn't take his kids back to Henting for a long time either. I used to work as a cashier at a BP that was right off the interstate. It doubled as a truck stop and was open 24 hours. I had worked there for about a year, so I was fairly comfortable with the job and I was used to working night shifts alone, despite being a smaller female. So I was working one night and everything was going as usual. It was about 1 a.m. and I saw a pickup truck pull in. 3 passengers got out and entered the store. The 2 men were wearing camouflage outfits and the woman was wearing jeans and a sweater. The men talked to the woman outside the door before entering and then they all went straight to me at the counter and asked for some cigarettes. As the one man was paying, the other one went to the other side of the store looking at drinks. I looked at the woman and realized that she had a look of panic on her face. I immediately felt in my gut that something bad was going on. We made eye contact and she mouthed the words, "Help me." Then the man grabbed his cigarettes with one hand and the woman's arm with the other and yelled at his buddy that they were ready to go. I was only 19 and wasn't really sure what to do, so I waited until they walked out the door, slid my hand under the counter, and hit the panic button. About 5 to 10 minutes later, the cops got there and I told them what happened. They looked at the surveillance videos and told me that they were investigating a kidnapping with a description of that same vehicle. I told them which direction they went on the interstate and the rest of the officers left after them while I gave my statement to the one who stayed behind. I never did find out if they caught them or not. This is a good story from a girl I used to date. This probably happened when she was about 16. She grew up in a one-stoplight town in the deep south, and houses that were fairly far apart from one another. Her room was on the corner of the house and surrounded by bushes on the outside. Her window faced the road, and she would very often hear traffic outside. She said she would often see headlights from the road as cars passed on the highway she lived on. For a couple of weeks, she said she noticed some really bright headlights through her window but thought nothing of it. It happened once a week at first, then twice a week, and about 4 weeks into it, she said that whatever car had those super bright lights was passing by her room almost every night. She finally complained about it to her dad, and he told her he'd look into it. Her dad came back inside, pale in the face. He said someone had made a path through the brush up to her window. The lights she said she saw were from a flashlight. They reported everything to the police and apparently, the lights stopped shortly after. I think her dad stood watch with his shotgun for a couple of nights, deterring whoever was doing it from coming back. They never heard anything about it again. I babysit my cousin's 2 kids pretty much every other Friday night so he and his wife can have some time alone and out of the house. Their kids are 2 years and 6 months old, so they have video monitors in each of their rooms, and I pretty much watch the monitors and read or watch TV. Roughly a month ago, I heard talking coming out of one of the monitors. It was a man's voice and he kept saying over and over again, "It's okay, go back to sleep, I'm here," and I could see a figure standing over the crib in the 6-month-old's room. I freaked out, thinking someone had broken in. They had a break-in around Christmas time and the guy was never caught. I called the police and my cousin and crept upstairs with a knife to protect myself and the babies. No one was upstairs and both kids were sound asleep. Needless to say, I was thoroughly freaked out until the police and my cousin came over. It didn't help that they lived in an older home and everything creaked. Fast forward to last week, the exact same thing happened to my cousin during the day while the kids were napping. But since it was daytime, the video monitor gave off a better picture of the room. Apparently, the one monitor in the 6-month-old's room switches over to the neighbor's monitor every once in a while. The voice I heard was that of his next-door neighbor soothing their crying baby, who is around the same age. I'm not sure if this was actually creepy or comforting, but here goes. My grandmother died on my 9th birthday. She was pretty sick with skin cancer. She went into the hospital during Hurricane Bob and stayed there until she passed. I remember things got pretty bad that New Year's, so my parents went to the hospital and my aunt was watching us. I remember lying in bed, praying, and I'm not religious at all, that she'd be okay and, if she wasn't going to be okay, that she'd at least be happy in heaven. I was also extremely sad that she was going to miss my birthday, New Year's Day, and also kind of selfish of me as a 9-year-old. At around 11:30 p.m. that night, I woke up to someone calling my name from the hallway. When I went to look, nobody was there. I checked all the bedrooms and the kitchen. Everyone was asleep, so there's no way my aunt or brother were calling my name. I figured I just heard it in my dreams and went back to bed. As I was trying to fall back asleep, I distinctly, like, clear as day, remember hearing my grandmother. I couldn't see her, but I could certainly feel her and hear her. I can't say for certain I wasn't dreaming, but if I was, this was the most lucid dream I've ever had. She said to me, "I held on for as long as I could so I wouldn't miss your birthday. My present will be a little late," sarcastic laugh. "It will be here next year. Happy birthday." Then silence. The next year my aunt gave me a cat for my birthday. The cat, Felix, and I instantly bonded, much like my grandmother and I. He followed me literally everywhere, never leaving my side. He would walk on a leash with me and ride in the car with me. The day I bought my first house was the day he abruptly passed away from cancer. He lived nearly 19 years. As weird as it sounds, I'm convinced my grandmother had planned to come back to me as a cat and stuck with me until she felt she was no longer needed. Little does she know, she's still needed. Back in the 70s, my grandfather dropped my grandmother, my mom, and her 2 sisters off to do some shopping on his way to work. Since he wasn't able to pick them up, they hitchhiked home. At the time, my mom was only around 10 or 11, her middle sister would have been about 7 or 8, and the youngest was about a year old. They got picked up by a guy in a pickup truck, who had them all sit in the back row with one of them holding the baby. My grandmother was giving directions to their home from the highway, but the guy ignored her and went past their exit, claiming he had to make a stop first. He didn't really say much else to them during the drive. My mom remembers my grandmother being very quiet and very nervous. Eventually, they came up to a farm. The driver told them to wait in the truck and went inside the house. While he was gone, they just sat there terrified. They were in the middle of nowhere and knew they couldn't make it out on foot. A few minutes later, the driver came out with a second guy who looked into the truck and saw my mom's youngest sister. He started flipping out, screaming at the driver that he shouldn't have brought the baby back, that they weren't going to do anything with her, and some other things I can't remember. He ended up telling the driver to get them away from the farm. The driver got back into the truck, apologized, and they got back on the highway and drove again in silence. My grandmother, normally a very smart woman, had him drive directly to their house, although I suspect her reasoning was she'd already given him the address before anything seemed off. They lived at that house for several years and luckily never saw either of them a second time. This happened around 1995. In my freshman year of middle school, 6th grade, there was a once-a-week group therapy session with developmentally delayed kids that involved them doing some crafts, playing with Legos, or watching a movie as a group. It was half regular kids, half developmentally delayed kids, and the regular kids could sign up for it. I signed up pretty instantly as it meant an escape from history once a week. One of my best friends at the time had the same idea, and it basically turned into a second lunch period for us. The whole thing was overseen by a therapist named Bruce, and it was generally pretty laid back. Bruce was an overweight, 50-ish, balding guy with the attitude and general appearance of Santa Claus. He ran most of the school's extracurriculars and was pretty much universally liked. The other important player in this story was a kid who I'll call G. You know that stereotype of psychopaths being obsessed with animal cruelty as kids? That was G, dead on. He'd regularly tell these long, excited stories during group about how much fun he had last week doing unspeakable things to a squirrel he caught in his live trap, or other similar things. Most of us just sort of ignored him, as it was just assumed that he was all talk and just making up gross stuff to get attention. So one week, we were playing with Play-Doh. Since it was a group for developmentally delayed kids, the huge tub of Play-Doh had long since taken on a uniform shade of turd brown, and the general goal was to get people to build things and tell stories about them. Most people just built dinosaurs or threw clay at each other. G, for whatever reason, had a huge flat square slab laid out and was building 4 large pillars on the corners. He eventually put a roof on it, which wouldn't stay on due to the lack of interior supports. The regular kids would always leave a few minutes early as the group ran right into the start of the next period and we'd need time to get to class. I was no different and walked out while Bruce and the other kids were smashing Play-Doh, giggling and throwing chunks of turd dough back into the bin. I got to my next class and the teacher wasn't there. Nobody knew what was going on. About 10 minutes later, she finally showed up looking frazzled and wouldn't give us any information other than, something happened that needed staff attention. Being 6th graders, we went nuts with speculation. A few hours later, I ran into my friend from the group, who was visibly jumpy and disturbed. He wouldn't tell me why, other than mentioning that the therapy group was cancelled indefinitely. I kept prying for information and eventually got the story out of him. So during the cleanup, the Play-Doh had to be compacted back into its tub. This involved lots of smashing Play-Doh sculptures, a part the kids greatly enjoyed, to the point where they'd try to smash other people's stuff. G's house was one of the last things to go. He smashed down 2 columns, let one of the other kids smash another, and finally dared Bruce to smash the last one really hard. The last one with the pocket knife in it. I never saw either Bruce or G ever again. When I was about 9 or 10, my older brother and I had a few friends over to stay the night. My dad had to work the next day, so we were all left at the house by ourselves for the day. We were excited to play PlayStation all day on our Saturday off. Well, my dad worked late that night, until probably 8 or 9. As soon as the sun went down, we went into one of the rooms upstairs to play Uno. Fast forward 30 minutes and we started hearing footsteps slowly walking up the wooden stairs. My dad wasn't going to be home for another 2 hours, so we didn't know who it was. There were 4 of us. Me, my brother, my friend, and his friend. We would take turns walking out of the room to see what it was, but before we could look down the dark stairs, we would hear what sounded like someone running down the stairs as fast as they could so they couldn't be seen. This continued for probably 2 hours, ending with all of us huddled in the room upstairs with the door wedged shut with a chair until my dad got home. None of us were really believers in anything paranormal, but a child's imagination is a crazy thing. Now, 15 years later, I still don't know what to make of it, but every one of us heard those footsteps walking up those dark stairs. I bring it up to my friend, who I'm still friends with, and he remembers it just as vividly as I do. It kind of creeps me out just thinking about it. It was 2001 and my friend and I were 17, both female, and driving back from a late movie to my house one night. I lived in a pretty rural area in Maine, about 20 minutes from the nearest town. As we were driving down the highway through the woods, we passed a median with a car sitting in it, facing the oncoming direction, with all its lights off. Right after we drove past it, it flashed its lights, did a 3-point turn, and started driving behind us. We giggled that, oh, it must be a gang initiation, we're gonna get murdered. Because this was Maine and that was obviously not what was happening. The turnoff from my road was a few miles away and this car stayed behind us the whole time. We made the left turn and the car kept going down the highway. But 30 seconds later, we realized that the car must have backed up on the highway and made the turn after us. Now we were getting a little worried. There was still one more road to turn down before we got to my house. This is way in the woods, and the car did the same thing. It backed up and made the left after us. Now we were legit freaked. I had a long driveway and the car followed us right into the driveway and almost up to my house, which had all the lights on because my mom was home. We ran into my house, just in time to see the mystery car reverse back down the driveway and drive away. To this day, we still have no idea why that car was following us, if they thought we were someone else or if they actually had bad intentions and only changed their mind when they saw that my house lights were on. Since we only ever saw the front of the car, we didn't get a license plate or a better description than a blue car. I just moved into a basement suite. Every time I went out, I would lock the deadbolt but not the door handle, but when I came home, a lot of the time the deadbolt would be unlocked and the door handle would be locked. At first, I thought I was just confused about which one I had locked, so I started paying more attention. It kept happening, and I realized someone must be going in when I went out. I assumed it was the landlady and was annoyed but didn't say anything at first. Then one day I came home and found the wrong lock locked again. I went in, annoyed, and opened the fridge to get something to eat. There was a book in the fridge that I had never seen before. I collected old books, and this one was published in the early 1900s, which creeped me out completely because it was like it had been left for me. I finally called my landlady and asked if she was going into my apartment and told her what had happened. She freaked right out and said the last person who lived there was a really creepy guy with mental health and drug problems. She got all the locks changed that day, and it never happened again. When I was little, my grandma used to tell me scary stories when I spent the night at her house. Looking back, it was probably too intense for a 10-year-old, but she would insist since she wanted me to know the horrors that were out there in the world. Anyhow, one story that still sticks in my memory like it was yesterday was the time she reminisced about when she was a wee lass. She grew up in the 1930s, and times were tough, so she worked nights after school. One night she was walking home, alone, when she heard this voice. Let's pause to paint the picture. Imagine walking down a sidewalk that's lit only by street lamps. On either side of the street, woods bordered the sidewalks. The town is very developed now, but this was 80 years ago. These street lamps were spread apart so there was darkness between them. So she's walking down this street alone and suddenly hears this voice inside her head. If you are a religious person, she insists it was the voice of an angel. Go to the middle of the street and run. She shakes the feeling off and keeps walking. It happens again, middle of the street, run. Feeling fairly freaked out, she does just that. Sprinting down the middle of the street, she looks back and sees a man coming out of the woods and freaking running after her. He must have been lying in wait, as she had enough of a head start to outrun him, or he gave up the chase. That's straight out of a horror movie, to be running and something is actually chasing you. It gives me the heebie-jeebies. Another story she told me. She divorced my grandpa since he cheated on her after over 50 years of marriage. He always wanted her back, but she was too smart for that. She got the house, but he would still come around. I remember the time she told me how she found footprints in the snow right outside the bedroom window that overlooks her bed. She thought it was Grandpa but never knew. When I was sleeping over, I used to be terrified to look up when I was waking up in case there was someone looking back. This happened in the UK. My stepdad is a paramedic and this happened to his coworkers. A family lived next door to an old man, but they hadn't seen him in a few days, so naturally, they called an ambulance to make sure he was okay in case he had a fall or something. The paramedics arrived and banged on the door for a while. Now, the front door was glass, but it was that rippled type of glass, so you could see through it but you couldn't see things clearly. The front door was also opposite the stairs. Anyway, they were banging on the door with no such luck, but then a man came hobbling down the stairs, stared at them, and then turned and walked towards another room in the back. The paramedics called the police at this point to try and force the door open so they could make sure the man was okay. They managed to get in the house and found the man, dead, in his bed. They checked all the windows and locks for break-ins and there was no sign, and all windows and doors had been locked from the inside. I should add that the man had been dead in his bed for around 3 or 4 days at this point and had died of natural causes. So who was the man coming down the stairs? Back when I was in middle school, I remember one late night on the weekend. My mother, my little sister, and I were home, except for my father who was visiting my sick grandma and my older sister who was working late that evening. It was around 11 o'clock and everyone in the house had basically gone to sleep when my mother opened my door and called me to her room. It was hot that day, so we had all the windows open. When I followed my mother to her room, She was acting strange and told me that there were some strange people outside and she didn't know what to do. Now, I live in a suburban neighborhood with a garage and a fence on the side of my house. The neighborhood isn't bad, but at night the streetlights don't work, so it is very dark. When I went to the window, I heard the sound of our fence gate being jiggled open. There were these two 20-something men trying to open the fence, which is very creepy when you're young and alone. My mom told me to do something. She doesn't speak English, so being barely in middle school, I tried to man up and yelled, "What are you doing?" The men froze and looked towards our window, but they couldn't see us because our lights were off. I can't remember much detail, but I do recall that the man who was trying to open the gate said in an awkward response that he and his friends were playing a game and just joking around. I wasn't a dumb kid, so I told them that I didn't believe him and that we would call the police. They didn't respond and just left. We were creeped out, so we tried calling my father, who wouldn't answer. We waited just in case, but after 30 minutes had passed, we went back to bed. Then my mom came crying into my room, saying they were back. Now I was really scared, so to make a huge scene that my neighbors would hopefully wake up to, I yelled at the top of my lungs that I was calling the cops. They ran away. Needless to say, we didn't get any sleep until my dad got home. When I was around 10, I was really into the Harry Potter books and would spend hours every day reading them. So when my parents, my little sister, and I had to attend a family gathering, I was just waiting to get home and continue reading. So we get home, and I immediately jump out of the car and head for the kitchen, grab my book, and start reading, while my parents and sister stay in the garden, talking and enjoying the sun, whatnot. I don't know how long I'd been reading when I heard someone walking up the stairs to the second floor, where our bedrooms are. Now, our house is quite big. We have the basement, where the back door is, leading to our garden where my family was talking, then the first floor with the kitchen and stuff, and also our front door which takes steps to reach, a second floor with bedrooms, and the attic. So I heard someone walking up the stairs to the second floor, which was a bit weird because I didn't hear anyone enter the house through the back door or take the stairs to the first floor, but I figured I just missed it because I was so caught up in my book. About an hour later, my family enters the kitchen and my mom goes to her bedroom to change. She immediately returns to the kitchen, asking me why I opened all the closets and drawers in the 3 bedrooms. I tell her that I've been reading, but that I did hear someone go upstairs. We ask my dad and my sister, but all 3 of them had been in the garden the entire time, none of them entered the house. So we were all freaking out. My mom called the cops and they came over, but we never found out what happened, who entered the house, and how they could have entered, seeing as the front door was still locked and as far as we know, nothing was taken. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was very lucky that whoever did it didn't decide to pass through the kitchen. I wouldn't have been able to escape, and the walls are so thick my parents wouldn't have heard it if I had screamed.